You're listening to Spill the Sea with Ashwati Ramesh.
Hi, Akshay.
Hi.
So nice to see you again. Thank you for coming on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you for having me over.
Of course. I also want to give a quick shout out to Copper and Close, which is the plant based cafe, who have pretty much let us take over their studio space.
Great place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So awesome. Akshay, before we jump into the details, do you want to tell us a little bit about what exactly Wenergie does?
Okay. So Wenergie, the idea behind Wenergie is to bring in a future of collaborative, decentralized energy. What we do is for the increasingly conscious urban Indian consumer, we try to make clean energy more accessible and more rewarding. The rest, I think, we'll anyway cover during the course of the podcast. So yeah.
Okay, great. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've done before Wenergie?
Okay, so I graduated in 2013, barely graduated because by 2012 I decided that I was done with formal institutionalized education,
Right.
and I just any but I also knew that I wasn't done learning.
Yeah.
And so I'm a very experiential learner,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to do that through a structured course or degree. Uh, I always wanted to be in the clean energy space, at least as far as realistic ambitions go. But I graduated in 2013, and this was when fracking made fossil fuels cool again. So I couldn't get an immediate job in the clean energy industry.
Right.
I worked at Flipkart for 3 years, and because if not clean energy, it's startup. So
Right.
that's what made that was a cool thing to do back then, right? And I think it still is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a great experience. I worked at Flipkart for 3 years.
What did you do there?
A business analyst, which is like euphemism for doing everything.
Right.
But it was fun. It's fun, right? It's for people who really want to just get a hang of everything, maybe be a generalist. That was really good.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. Great company, great people.
Yeah.
But then looking back, it was like the reason I left that was because that probably wasn't my journey.
Sure.
It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about general work ethic and what it means, or also on how to find really high agency people and bring them together, or even work and collaborate with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was in 2016.
Right.
Then I started another company called Airrise. So Wenergie is my second startup.
Yeah.
So Airrise, I started with my friend. The hypothesis around that was that it was also very similar, or at least in similar lines to Wenergie, at least when it comes to clean energy. The hypothesis was that uh, energy efficiency is the base of the clean energy pyramid. So that always comes first, and air conditioning is the biggest contributor to energy consumption, and therefore that's the biggest opportunity for energy efficiency.
Right.
And within air conditioning, it's industrial and commercial spaces that consume the maximum air conditioning, and therefore they have the biggest scope for
Right.
air conditioning. So these were the three main hypotheses behind that. But I think looking back, it was a little too early.
Right.
Even when it comes to HVAC solutions, we still are a little too early when it comes to industries and commercial buildings, looking at energy efficiency as a primary factor behind their cooling solutions. It's
Right.
still about designing the environment that is conducive to their business and their production.
Right.
So it was extremely early, and I think very soon it was clear that our hypotheses weren't valid yet. So that's the reason I had to come out of that.
Okay.
Following that, I brought some of my analyst experience into into the clean energy industry, because this is when the first few large projects were being set up in India, and then like also Indian companies, Indian developers were expanding their footprint to Sri Lanka, Nepal, Vietnam.
Yeah.
So I worked with a few of these developers on large scale solar plants in India, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Maldives, and Nepal. It started off by bringing my analytical and modeling experience over there,
Right.
and then I always wanted to be more involved in the technical part, so
Yeah.
picked up a lot of skills over there, and then I just wanted to be much more hands-on, and I also realized the scope of clean energy, that its power is in decentralization. Like I can power my own house from my rooftop with solar,
Yeah.
and I found that personally very attractive, and that's what got me into Wenergie. So Wenergie started in 2018,
Okay.
and its first avatar was as a pure play solar installation company for
Okay.
households.
I didn't know
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So it's the current iteration is probably, I think, 20 pivots later,
Oh,
hard and
wow.
soft pivots later, but yeah.
Amazing. So, we didn't get to finish this earlier, but what was the story behind the name Venergy?
So interestingly, it was called Elephant Energy in the beginning.
Okay.
uh, I thought that that name really captured what we were all about, metaphorically, without being too literal. So Venergy is extremely literal. It's like V plus energy. That's
Yeah.
it. There's not much to it. But yeah,
Yeah. It's self-explanatory.
yeah, it's
Everyone knows.
self-explanatory. Right, and the reason why it is GIE in the end rather than GY
Yeah.
is because we didn't get the any of the domain names .com, .io, anything,
Right.
with WENERGY.
So you had to get creative with the spelling.
Yes. And it actually really helped, because one of our first few customers, they mistook us for NG, which is like the
Right.
French energy giant. They're
Yeah.
like, hey, you're a really big company. Sure.
Worked in your favor.
Whatever works. Yeah.
No, that's good. So you did touch upon this earlier where we were talking about decentralization. The industry, globally at least, is obviously seeing a shift towards decentralization as well as digitalization. How are you seeing this transformation play out?
Honestly, in terms of proportion and scale, decentralization and digitalization are uh, they are not that dramatic.
Okay.
It's if you look at India, we have like a very small share of overall solar, let alone overall energy mix, but overall solar, a very small part of that comes from decentralized rooftop solar. Wind, there is no decentralized wind. It's hardly anything.
Yeah.
But then, as a philosophy or an ideology, it is a really big shift, right? Like, it's a complete rethinking of how energy can be produced and consumed. So that way, yes, it is a pretty big shift. When it comes to digitalization, honestly, we haven't yet scraped the surface of what is possible.
Yeah.
Uh, take any other field, marketing for example.
Mm.
What The way people can capture data, the way companies capture data, a lot
Yeah.
of it is, they are dark patterns, but still, if you just look at how they capture data, like how creative they get
It's
on
pretty
just capturing
nuanced.
data. Yeah, it's very nuanced, and once they capture the data, there's a lot that they do with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what it probably means for you and me is like somebody calling you like, "Sir, I'm calling from Bajaj Finance. Do you want loan?" But then there's a lot that marketing companies do with data, and it's fascinating. It's also scary. In the energy industry, I don't think we've even scraped the surface of digitalization. Not just capturing data, but also how it can be used.
Yeah.
There's a long way to go for that, and there are. So I can tell you maybe like 10 ways that we can do this, but then that's just prophesizing, and
Sure.
we'll probably uh, I don't know whether it'll be true.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Akshay, for the big question, can you explain for our listeners what the concept of a virtual power plant actually is?
Okay, so the basic, as we were talking about decentralization, the basically what's happening in energy is that we're seeing the energy transition is around decentralization, digitalization, and of course democratization and decarbonization. Right? A larger share of our energy mix is coming from renewables, which are intermittent, and also these are not very large plants, but these can be anything from one panel, which can light up one single light bulb, to extremely large solar plants, which are just about comparable to the moderately sized thermal plants. But all of these are spread out, right? Uh, Even a single house becomes a power plant. And on the other hand, you're seeing consumption patterns dramatically changing,
Yeah.
because um, till very recently, it was industrial shifts that really dictated how energy was being used, the patterns and trends in how energy was being used. But then uh, with the increasing use of electric vehicles and their charging and air conditioning or heating,
Yeah.
a lot of it, heating, a lot of it was on gas or coal or even wood, but that's moving to electric. In a lot of places, it's already moved to electric. Cooking's moved to a large part of cooking is becoming electric now.
Yeah.
So with all these lifestyle changes and new developments like EVs, the way we consume electricity is also changing drastically. Right? So how do you match that? So how do you match this changing energy consumption pattern with, and how do you reconcile that with the fact that the way we generate electricity is also changing because it's more intermittent and more and extremely decentralized. Traditionally, you had one large power plant, and which is the generation,
Yeah.
then miles and miles of power lines, which is transmission, and you literally had like a few wires taking all the electricity for an entire city, and then it comes to the distribution network, and that comes into our homes.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's also like, with a few thumb rules, it's managed. And if something goes out of whack, there is a, they call that load shedding,
Yeah.
blackout. We've all experienced this in our childhood, right?
Yes.
But now that's changing, right? That can't cut it. There are risks involved in every part of this, and also transition. The energy transition is affecting every part of this. So what a virtual power plant is actually an aggregation of small scale renewable energy plants and energy consumption. All of that gets aggregated onto in one place and managed in real time, right?
Right.
So intermittent energy generation is matched with energy consumption. That's pretty much what a virtual power plant is. Power plant is a bit of a misnomer over here, because you have generation, transmission, and distribution, which is the management part of it. All of that baked into what a VPP is. Right?
Right.
So it's three in one. It's not just a power plant.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a broad definition of what virtual power plant is, and it's still developing, right? Like as the industry develops, the definition of this also gets further refined, and then there are different people taking it in different tangents, but it's pretty much uh, if I was to encapsulate it in a nutshell, virtual power plant is nothing but an aggregation of energy generation and energy consumption,
Right.
and managing it in real time.
Right. No, thanks for explaining that so clearly. And the question that comes up is probably what happens to storage in this case?
Right. So if you look at it as a supply chain analogy, right, you have a producer and you have a consumer, and a consumer needs something which a producer makes, and it's not always that can be met in real time. You need a warehouse in the middle, right? So that's what a battery is. That's what battery storage does. Now, ideally, if we can match generation and consumption exactly, we don't need battery storage.
Yeah.
And
that's a perfect world.
that's a perfect world. Perfect worlds don't exist. So we need some amount of storage, yes, because of course, what happens at night?
Yeah.
Sun doesn't shine at night, and the wind doesn't always blow, right? So you need storage for these kind of cases, but ideally, a virtual power plant should try to reduce the amount of storage that's needed, because even though the price of energy storage has come down by a factor of 10 in the last 10-15 years, it still is expensive, and storage cannot it's still so expensive that storage doesn't make financial sense unless there are multiple uses bundled in, right?
Right.
As a standalone backup system, it doesn't make sense because diesel generators are cheaper. As a buffer for energy trading, it doesn't make sense because the volume of energy trading is only so much that you can do in a single day.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a lot of these energy services that need to be bundled for energy storage to make sense.
Right.
So as VPPs develop, these applications also will develop. So
Yeah.
energy storage will make more sense. But also VPPs, on the other hand, they reduce the need for energy storage.
Right.
So it's like solving the problem from two sides.
So I do want to dive a little deeper into the infra bit, but we'll come back to that. You were talking about decentralization at a very individualistic level. What are your thoughts on where peer-to-peer trading is at right now?
So peer-to-peer trading in every other field, right? Let's say in finance, peer-to-peer made sense because it was replacing something that was less efficient. In energy, there is nothing yet. There is no existing network that peer-to-peer energy can peer-to-peer energy trading can be a direct drop-in replacement for. So I personally don't feel that peer-to-peer energy trading is going to take off until we have that.
Right.
Like I get it. I get that. Uh, I get the appeal of peer-to-peer trading because it removes a monopolistic large platform, and that worked in remittances. It worked in payments. It might work in e-commerce or logistics and delivery, but in energy there is no large monopolistic entity yet that needs replacement.
Right.
We can probably say utilities, but uh, utilities also aren't there yet when it comes to technology. Right? So we're talking about 3 or 4 leaps in technology,
Right.
where the market is like 7 steps behind.
Right. Are there any regions who have successfully implemented a VPP system or even
Yes.
peer-to-peer trading for that?
So peer-to-peer is probably a subset of VPP.
Right.
If given a very broad definition of VPP, right? But yes, it is taking off in a lot of places. But yeah, it's still quite nascent. So even Tesla, their initial VPP pilots have like they operate at the scale of like 50 to 100,000 customers.
Okay.
So peer-to-peer transactions also, uh, they are taking off in Scandinavia and some parts of Europe. But yes, all of this still has an intermediary of a utility over there.
Right.
Utility or some sort of distribution company involved.
Right. Got it. So, Akshay, can you now maybe dive a little deeper into how your offering actually works?
Right. So I think how the offering works starts with for whom it should work. Right.
Sure.
So I just mentioned at the beginning of this of the podcast that we are trying to target India's increasingly conscious urban population.
Yeah.
Right. And we are seeing that people like you and me, we are making conscious lifestyle choices towards sustainability. So this is the target audience, right? Urban India, people who are looking at more conscious energy solutions, and they are individuals. We are not yet looking at a B2B or a government segment yet. Now, for these, we're trying to make clean energy more accessible.
Sure.
So the way we interact with how electricity is being used, the way we interact with the electricity system right now is broadly through our electricity meter and the bill that comes every month.
Yes.
So this will probably go into the interfaces, but that's also kind of important. But yeah, how we interact with electricity right now is through our electricity meter, then through electric vehicles, and then through broadly some large heavy consumption appliances like air conditioners.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is a way for people to interact with electricity, because 5-star ACs sell more than 3-star ACs, and people pay a premium for that. And of course, for those who have their own rooftop, it is through solar panels, right? If they do adopt that.
Yeah.
Now, these are the broad gateways for people into the electricity ecosystem. How we help them is by tapping into these gateways and enhancing these gateways, and in ensuring that they are able to. So we have a solution for smart meters, electricity meters, for electric vehicles, for air conditioners, as well as people with solar. Right? We have Reader, which is our hardware solution. It's a personal energy assistant of sorts.
Right.
So it interfaces with your air conditioner or your EV or your electricity meter or solar panels, and we try to make this more rewarding. So we capture data on how people are using this.
Right.
We give them a choice on if it's just to give you a very brief customer journey on how, let's say, an air conditioner is used.
Right.
Reader, the personal assistant, sits like it's like a thermostat for your air conditioner, which also measures your energy consumption and the energy consumption patterns. Now, based on how you use this, right? So, a very basic example would be if you use your air conditioner during the day,
Yeah.
and the daytime is when the grid is flush with solar energy, you get points for that, right? So that's the points are the incentive for using electricity when the grid is flush with renewables.
Right.
Which also means that you are using a larger proportion of your energy consumption comes from clean energy resources.
Right.
Right. So that's how we help our customers. And now those points we are looking at enabling them to encash them as reward points, just like credit card reward points or even credit coins.
Right.
We are looking at enabling our users to encash that for discounts or rewards for certain brands, and that's something that we are still building out.
Right.
Yeah, because that's honestly what works for this segment is rewards.
Absolutely. And the Indian market,
Yep.
especially. Okay, so just to summarize and maybe simplify it a little bit, if I am the individual, one of the individuals that you're catering to, and I have air conditioning, I have solar, what would the steps look like for our
Right.
engagement?
So, if you have any of these, you need not have all of these. You could
Sure.
have any of these,
Yeah.
right? So that way we are transcending the limitations of space.
Right.
So, let's say someone living in an apartment,
Hmm.
they don't have a roof to install solar, but they still want to consume electricity more sustainably,
Yeah.
right? So, so for anyone, it is just for any of these. It need not be all of these.
Sure.
For someone who has any of these, either air conditioner or electric vehicle or solar panels, uh, or it could even be for your whole home,
Right.
right? The interface would be through your electricity meter. It's as simple as install our reader energy assistant,
Okay.
use energy when the sun is shining, and get rewarded for that.
Right. Interesting. So maybe this is a good time to also talk about a little more on the infra side that you need for a virtual power plant to actually work. Could you
Yeah.
elaborate on that a little bit?
So there are two approaches to building infrastructure. One is like a large scale, either central deployment. So either you have like a really large battery bank somewhere that buffers demand and supply,
Right.
or you have something that is mandated by a utility. Let's say, let everyone have smart meters, and the utility is sponsoring that. Right? So that's one approach, a central top down approach. But then that doesn't work because VPP is by nature decentralized.
Yeah.
So then the challenge is, how do we make it so simple for people to participate in this? We know that it's a decentralized infrastructure. DeepIn is what the cool word is right now, decentralized physical infrastructure.
Right.
But I'm not going into jargon,
Okay.
right? But we know that there is some infrastructure needed, right? Like there is some additional hardware requirement needed for people to participate in this.
Yeah.
So we are trying to make it as simple as possible, as simple and as small as possible, so that the barrier for people to participate is as low as possible. And so right now we brought down our infrastructure participation requirement from, like, you need to have solar and from these certain brands. From there, we've brought it down to all you need to do is you need to have an electricity connection at home
Yeah.
and install our personal energy assistant, and you're part of it.
Right.
And so that way we also distribute so infrastructure has two parts. One is the actual hardware, and second is the setting up of the hardware.
Yeah.
Right? So we've simplified both of these, and we are trying to distribute that. The effort to install this, we are trying to distribute that and make it as small, as easy and seamless as possible.
Right. And just going back to the technology component of this, are you using any advanced tech?
Yes, and okay. So I get asked a lot whether Wenergie is an AI company, or
Right.
whether Wenergie is a Web3 company because decentralized, right? Like, uh, now we do use these tools a lot, but these are tools, and a company can't be defined by the tools that it uses. I strongly believe that a company is defined by the impact it delivers for its users. Right? So yes, we are an AI company. Yes, we are a Web3 company. Yes, we are a decentralized network management company.
Right.
But Microsoft Excel is also something that we use. So does that make us a Microsoft Excel company?
Right.
Screwdriver is another tool that we use. Does that make us a screwdriver company? No.
Right.
Right? So yes, we use a lot of, and I'm not a naysayer of Web3 or AI,
Sure.
because this really makes our job easy.
Yeah.
right? In a lot of ways, it makes our job easier. A lot of hardware improvements also over the last few years. That's also something that's really helped us, right? So the goal is to ensure that we use whatever tech is there to deliver as much impact as possible, because
Sure.
at the end of the day, we are measured by the impact that we deliver, not by how cutting edge our tech is.
Got it. And what about security risks?
This is so Ukraine. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the first few ways they went about this was they hacked into their power networks.
Yeah.
And now with IoT devices just out there, uh, we have a lot of vulnerability built into our power grid. And you have the grid being built the way it is, and it's not necessarily a problem with the way it is built, but then one point of failure can have cascading effects and the entire grid can be shut down
Yeah.
from one point of vulnerability, right? We are already seeing that people have invaded the power grid through mobile phones, through CCTV cameras,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of vulnerabilities built into this. And then when it comes to networked hardware, when it comes to where we are sourcing this from, I think many of us would have heard about how Israel targeted people in Lebanon through by implanting explosives in their pagers and then sending a command to uh,
Make it pop.
make it pop. We can't have that happening with electricity, especially when we are dealing with EVs. EVs already have some EVs already have a bad rap of going up in flames, and we are dealing with not pagers. Pagers have like a really tiny battery. If that can pop and kill one person, a single EV battery can pop and kill like at least an entire building. So, and that what makes that pop can also come through a cybersecurity risk. So we've consciously taken a decision to manufacture all our energy gateway devices, right? So that we have control on this,
Okay.
right? So that's one way we are trying to reduce that risk. And we know that there are going to be millions of these IoT devices out there.
Yeah.
So it's not so much as, do we get into manufacturing because it's expensive? We know that there is going to be a demand for this. It's just that, how do we safeguard individual users
Yeah.
from. So that was just like the making things pop. That's just the worst case scenario, right? And
Yeah.
I might have a vested interest in spreading that fear so that my devices sell. But then also it's about who owns the data, right? Like we also spoke about in the digitalization part, we also spoke about people just calling about whether you want a loan.
Yeah.
So that's a more day to day. So data security, not just about whether someone can tunnel into the electricity grid or into individual appliances and make them pop. It's also about whether your data is secure.
Yeah.
So that's another angle that we are really looking at.
Right. I was going to save this question for more towards the end, but since we have been talking about security, as you said, right, systems can get hacked, etc.
Yeah.
How do we kind of avoid? It takes one bad player, right, to shut down everything.
Right. So this is where probably when we look at the inherent advantages of a decentralized system. So it's not just that it is distributed everywhere, but also the ownership is distributed. Ownership and therefore the points of vulnerability are distributed.
Right.
Right? So by putting data and control in the hands of individual users rather than one platform, which can be a source of vulnerability, that's one way we kind of mitigate this risk, because you don't need to just by hacking into one platform, you can't bring down an entire country's electricity grid. You would need to hack at least 51% of the
Right.
of our systems,
Right.
which becomes difficult, right? Of course, that is also possible by having an internal bad actor, but
Yeah.
that's something which that's on us,
Yeah.
right? So people trust us, hopefully. But
Got it.
yeah, so distributing that risk and making a bad actor have to hack into 51% of the network rather than just one or 2 nodes, that makes it but that said, if that one node is hacked and that one node is vulnerable to popping and killing an entire building, we also need to solve for that.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why we also take that very seriously. So the only person who can make right now, the only person who can make an EV battery pop is the EV battery owner themselves, if they know how to do that.
Right.
But we are assuming that nobody wants to do that to their own car,
Sure.
because that becomes suicide bombing.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting conversation. So, bringing it back to maybe the customer bit of it, first, where are you present? Like, you're currently focusing on India.
Yes, so we are currently looking at Bangalore specifically, right? And it's still more like a beta launch rather than rather than fully rolled out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Bangalore and conscious consumers.
Right. And what have been some of the challenges that you've been facing in terms of getting these individuals on board?
So the challenges were probably not because of our consumers or their needs, but it was more on how do we bring something uh, as abstract as a virtual power plant and distill it into something which our target customer would want. Right? So also we very consciously chose this customer segment because to be a this is the only way. Targeting this customer segment is the only way we build brand, or we can build brand recall, and
Right.
building brand recall is the only way we get a multiple on when we raise funds, right?
Right.
So this is a conscious call.
Yeah.
The customer segment that, and of course it's much easier dealing with them because I also fall in that segment. So
It's more relatable.
yeah, it's much more relatable,
Right.
right? So now how do you distill an abstract concept to something that is understandable and also design the interfaces that it is very seamless for this customer segment to participate in? That was a challenge, right? So from you know install our very complicated sounding device which will further do this and then that, and then finally one someday, when we have like dynamic pricing, you get some reward, like distilling those multiple steps into install our personal energy assistant, use electricity during the daytime, and get rewarded.
Yeah.
That journey was really hard.
Right. And actually, it's good that it came up. You mentioned dynamic pricing.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. So electricity, like every other commodity, has its own demand and supply metrics, right? Like, let's say how the price of coffee changes seasonally.
Yeah.
The price of electricity, at least what it costs the producers of the distributors of electricity, that price changes not just seasonally but also within the day, because you have sunlight hours and a lot of solar coming in,
Yeah.
and also based on demand. So there are so many factors affecting the price of electricity, but what you and I know is at the end of the month we have one line item in our electricity bill,
Yeah.
right? So the cost of electricity is dynamic, And therefore the price that consumers pay in a lot of different countries, it is that also is dynamic.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case for India. It is definitely not the case for Indian residential consumers. Right? But this is something where logically it does make sense, right? Like, you know, electricity should, if it costs people to produce at different times, uh, if there is a different cost to producing that, that should somehow reflect in the
Their
price that consumers pay,
compensation.
right?
Sure.
uh,
To clarify, right now we are paying fixed slab rates.
yeah,
Right. So this whole shift to dynamic pricing is to better compensate a producer and a user.
right. And we are not even touching upon how fair that is, right? Because and whether consumers are protected well enough over there. Because yes, theoretically, a consumer can pay much less to use electricity during the daytime, but then there could be spikes. There could be certain random events where the price of electricity just shoots up. So it becomes like day trading of electricity,
Yeah.
which is involved with its own risks. Right? So are consumers protected well enough over there? So that's the reason why we are. Uh, so we. Uh, so one reason is that we don't have dynamic pricing for this customer segment, but again, we are uh, we are bypassing this entire necessity to set up smart meters and billing infrastructure and then dynamic pricing. We are bypassing that with just a shortcut that, you know, we have certain rules built into our system that if you use electricity in this time window, you get rewarded with these many coins, right? And coins are very convenient to buffer people from the risk of money.
Yeah.
Right? So we are transacting in coins rather than rupees or dollars or cents. Right? So that kind of buffers people from the risks involved over here.
Right.
Right? Of course, now it becomes like, you know, uh, is it just another meme coin or just another token? But then safety is also built into this. Right? It's not meant for speculation, but more for transactions around an electricity.
Right. And who are, I mean, I know we talked about this in different sections of our conversation, but in terms of if you had to summarize all of the stakeholders you do have to work with, and what would these collaborations look like?
So when this is finally fully fleshed out and rolled out, there are so many touch points involved, right? Like there is of course the energy consumer or the prosumer, because some of them will have solar panels as well, and they also have different ways of participating, either through their air conditioner or EV or through their entire home consumption, which also brings the electric vehicle manufacturer or the air conditioner manufacturer as a, a parallel or tangential stakeholder over here. Then you have the utility company over here, the distribution of the utility company over here, because we are still using their network. Right? We are building on top of them, but we are still leveraging their network.
Just to
So
pause you over there, you did mention earlier, or when we met for the first time, you were doing some work there as well, right?
yes,
So,
yes.
what happened over there?
So the utility segment is still very nascent right now, or at least the need for this is very nascent right now, because we are talking about. So a utility comes in when there are network effects, but network effect is only there when the network has hit critical mass, right? So a utility can't utility isn't they have different motivations, right? Like and different problems of their own,
Sure.
right? So they are not there's no need for them to be invested in building up this critical mass of the network. So therefore a utility will probably come in much later, when there are like 10 lakh houses, 1 million houses,
Right.
which can now controlling or managing these can have a significant impact for the utility.
Right.
And so that's actually our next milestone. We are looking at having like 1 megawatt hour of throughput from our network, for which we
Right.
would need like about 20,000 households.
Right.
So that right now we are at approximately 1/5 of that number.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the next big milestone, getting to 1 megawatt hour, which is like the next
Right.
exponentially next level.
Right. Exciting.
So yeah, because we don't have that scale, uh, and utilities won't
Jump
drive
on
that.
right
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
or they won't drive that themselves. Utilities are probably they would come much later.
Understood. Isn't P2P trading possible on a VPP?
It is. It is possible, but then you need some infrastructure for that. And like to have like one common bill where the utility and other people in the peer-to-peer network are involved, and you get like one consolidated bill. For that, there is a lot of infrastructure development that's needed,
Right.
and then also a lot of people to be participating for it to actually make sense.
Understood. Maybe now switching gears to talk about regulations a little bit. What are your thoughts? Are there any? I mean, obviously there are a lot of
yeah.
gaps. What are the main areas that you think need to be addressed to help scale something like a VPP setup?
So there are two kinds of regulations, right? Like, uh, it's very convenient to say that regulations are lagging indicators, and therefore we shouldn't really bother about regulation. But then when it comes to, let's say, cybersecurity, we are not. Yes, it's cool to say that we are doing something completely new, and therefore no regulation exists around that, and therefore we should ignore the need for regulation. It's very convenient to say that, and I would want to be there. But then there are a lot of things that, some existing regulations in parallel fields can help as guidelines and guardrails into how we build our product and how we roll it out. Right?
Right.
So certain regulations become irrelevant, right? Because and certain way now I did mention that the way we incentivize customers is through coins and points, reward points, rather than actual rupees.
Right.
That is a way that we are playing around the regulations, that there can only be one electricity supplier to one household at a given point of time. Uh, so it's a way for us to conveniently bypass that, while also ensuring that, like, that's of course one of the reasons, right? Because when we are not dealing in kilowatt hours and rupees, rather rather services, and services to a solar owner and coins, that ensures that a lot of regulations conveniently get bypassed. But then we still need to, because we are part of the grid, we
Yeah.
still need to take care of all the cybersecurity risks, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of regulations are guardrails and guidelines for us, which are helpful. Many of them are inconvenient, so we build around that or innovate around that. And honestly, like, I think 90% of the regulation in this is yet to be built, because the field is yet to really reach there.
All right. So, what's in store for the next few years? I know you mentioned a couple of things already. What are the other markets you're looking to expand to, etc.?
So uh, I think what's in store for the immediate future is, it's difficult or almost impossible to plan in like anything more than 2 year horizons. When it comes to startups, I believe that anything beyond a 6 month horizon becomes very, very abstract, right? So yeah, it becomes wishful thinking when I tell you that we have amazing things lined up for the next year. But yeah, since we are doing this on New Year's Day,
Humor our listeners.
yeah, so like new beginnings and the start of a planning cycle and all. We're actually looking at. I told you we are looking at getting to that 1 MWh milestone,
Yeah.
which would involve about 20,000 households, or maybe a few larger households, fewer but larger households. So that's what we are really looking at building towards, and we're looking at Bangalore right now because this is where people get tech, and they're more fascinated to try out new things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it works both ways, right? There is a lot of delusion also in this,
Sure.
but then it's also good that people are willing to try and open-minded about
Yeah.
new stuff. So yeah, that's what's in store for the next 6 months. I would love to tell you that 10 years later we would have displaced all discoms, utilities, and we would become like the one big worldwide global utility company.
Monopolistic. Yeah. The power that you were talking
Yeah.
about.
But I don't want to tell the world that I'm going to become an evil capitalist. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. No, that's super exciting and good luck to you guys.
Thank you.
Excited to see how this plays out. And maybe to close this discussion, I like asking founders this because it's nice to hear also what you all do outside of work, because I know it's so hectic, bandwidth issues, etc. So how do you make time and what do you do
So
outside of work?
actually, for me, it's like work doesn't need to be hectic. There's a lot of uh, there's a lot of busy work that's involved, right? So what actually I've observed about myself and generally about people I work with is that we are also seasonal. There are
Sure.
times in the year where we are less productive, right? And yeah, it's very convenient to say that people are lazy and uh, the cold weather is an excuse for people just sleeping in, but it is true, right? Like not everyone is as efficient throughout the year.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense pushing others as well as pushing myself, right? So yes, I do believe that sometimes I am hard on others, but then I'm also hard on myself, and I do feel that sometimes. But acknowledging that we are seasonal, and also like a lot of work doesn't need to be done. Like this is
Yeah.
counterintuitive, right? Because everyone likes to say that they're hustling all the time. I've been there, but it doesn't really work.
It's impossible.
It's impossible, right? Like, yes, you need to look out for the right opportunity and then hustle over there.
Yeah.
There's no point in hustling all the time.
Yeah.
It just burns out. Like, I've burnt out multiple times, right? And never realized that I burnt out and just continued. And I think there's this Neil Young quote that it's better to burn out than fade away. And I was living, I think I still believe that. I
Yeah.
still believe that, right? Like, because it's being intense, at least for a short burst, is better than like that also ensures that you don't fade away.
Yeah.
Right? So being kind to yourself and understanding yourself, like when you work best, that really helps. And also, I think everything around work life is that I believe that work and life need not be discrete.
Sure.
So different things work for different people, right? Like some
Yeah.
people they work so that they earn money and then do the things that they love.
Yeah.
Right? I think being a startup founder, I have the privilege of working on something I love. So
Yeah.
I don't need to like really compartmentalize my life
Sure.
that way. So that helps a lot. That helps a lot. And everything I do is it kind of like builds into this philosophy of it need not directly directly tie into how tie into electricity or virtual power plants or clean air to breathe and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
even my hobbies, like I was telling you about putting plant cuttings in takeaway containers.
Yeah,
Right? Like
that's for context for our listeners. Akshay, when he met me today, gave me a cute little xerophyte in recycled soil,
yeah,
you said,
yeah,
and in a plastic container, which he
yeah,
was trying to get rid of. But I thought it was such a great idea. Thank you so much.
yeah. So like these kind of things, like they one is for me, gardening is a mindful activity, right? Because it ties into what I do at work as well,
Right.
and effectively you're building something, right? Like so that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So a lot of my hobbies also, the hobbies that survive are not like things that are completely different from the way you believe life should be led,
Yeah.
right? Like, so for example, someone who believes in calm someone who believes in calm, tranquil, peaceful life, playing the guitar or like playing rock music is not necessarily a hobby that is going to stick for them,
Sure.
right? So I'm talking from experience because that's something that didn't stick for me.
Right.
Probably I gave it maybe like 5 years,
Maybe
but
you
then
should switch to hang drums. More
yes,
meditative.
yes, or the prayer bowls.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, so what is dissonant from someone's lifestyle? That hobby doesn't necessarily stick. But then that doesn't mean that just because playing the guitar for a rock band doesn't last for me, that doesn't mean that I need to completely cut away from that,
Sure.
right? Because a lot of music is very deep, right? Like
Yeah.
I think the most, I think Scandinavian death metal has got really meaningful lyrics.
Is it?
Yes.
I don't know this.
Yeah. And even a lot of classic rock, some of the lyrics are like, they're very, very meaningful, and it's just delivered in a way that might be dissonant for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Akshay. I think this was quite an enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I
Yes,
think
thank you.
very, very informative for our listeners.
And I think it's really interesting that you're doing this.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Lovely having you here. Wishing you and the team good luck.
Thank
And
you.
thank you again. Thanks for tuning in today. See you next episode.